It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take 5, it's the 5-minute edition of Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman, he is Logan Paulsen. Happy New Year, everybody. Full tape breakdown coming tomorrow, but Logan, obviously a lot of our attention is going to be towards the NFL draft. All of a sudden, after the weekend that was, the Commanders hold the number 2 pick in the draft, and they are the odds-on favorite, 69% according to ESPN Analytics, that they will wind up with that number 2 pick based off of the results of this upcoming weekend. So, quarterback is going to be in the mix here. We will talk about Sam Howell's day on the full pod, the tape breakdown tomorrow. But one of the questions that I have for sure going into especially this draft class as we look at the different guys that will be considered is how much does age matter for specifically a quarterback coming out? You have guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix who had incredible days on New Year's Day, both of whom are 6th-year players. Jaden Daniels is another guy who's I think he's a 5th year. He's 23, turned 23 in December. So you have these older quarterbacks that have a lot of experience. How does that play into a draft evaluation?
Yeah, I think it used to be like a huge thing where you wanted like a younger guy, but I think now there's kind of this shift, especially with how long quarterbacks are playing, I think, that older guys are a little bit more appetizing. They're a little bit more palatable, I'll say. And I think the way I look at it, it makes a lot of sense to me because you want guys that have played a lot of football, that have kind of learned multiple offenses, have seen different coverages, have done different things. And, we were talking about like language learning and stuff like that and how that kind of becomes more difficult as you get older. But these guys, they've developed a process and a methodology for learning football. And I want those guys in. And honestly, the older guy, I think another reason they're more palatable is like you want that kind of captain of your organization to have some maturity to them. And I think like there's value to having a guy that can be in a press conference, that can handle adversity, that's been up, that's been down. Brock Purdy was a 5th-year player when he was coming out of college. So I think there are advantages to that. Is it the end all be all? No. Does young players can't play the position at a high level? No. But I do think that specifically for the quarterback position, it's becoming much more accepted. Like for example, they're talking about Joe Alt, right? I was listening to something today, the tackle out of Notre Dame, 6'8", 320, all these things. He's going to be 20. And I think that gets a lot of coaches excited that he's so young, that he's so malleable, that he's physically going to develop. With the quarterback, I don't think it's as important to see that, to have that physical upside because it's all mental. It's not all mental. Obviously, you want to see them throw the ball far and stuff, but there's such a huge mental component to the position. I think that experience is very, very valuable.
So the counterpoints, if you will, the negatives, the things that I don't even call them negatives, the things that would give you pause. One, I think is more of a myth than a reality at this point, which is like, okay, well, he's older. Well, we're not going to have him as long. I don't think you worry about that anymore.
Right.
Quarterbacks are playing into their mid-30s. Like if you get 10 great years out of a guy, like you're pretty psyched. The question, I guess, would be like if you get a guy at 22 and he can be in his prime by 25, do you get more? And do you get some of those years cheaper? Maybe. But at the end of the day, like I don't think that's that big of a deal anymore. I think the one that is a bigger deal for me, the one that I worry about, and it's impossible to know because it's not like 100% of guys this will be a negative or positive or neutral, whatever, is if you play well in college when you're 23 and you're playing against a bunch of 19-year-olds, you should be better than them because you're way older. And especially at that position, your decision-making ability, just the way that the human brain develops, is significantly better once you get into your early to mid-20s compared to when you are in your late teens and early 20s. And so if all of a sudden you are dominant in years 5 and 6 of your college career when you weren't that impressive to me, or you weren't that impressive in years 1 through 4, that is to me like if I'm a scout, like I want to understand how and why that happened. Now, if you were good all 6 years, then like, okay, cool. And again, it's not a deal breaker, but I think when we talk about like some of the things that are concerning, that make you pause on an older player, that's something that has to be sorted out amongst the scouting process and by an organization if they're going to invest a first round pick, and especially a high one, in one of these older QBs.
Yeah, but I think you go the other way too, like guys that started their career well and then kind of plateaued. And I don't want that guy. I want the guy that's going to improve, and I want the guy that's going to develop. And I do think there is not everyone's the same, not every situation's the same, but I definitely, as a talent evaluator, prefer someone who's playing their best football recently. Like every year there's a guy like Singletary, the corner out of LSU a couple years ago, who played amazing as a freshman and then had 2 years where he was kind of middling, he was dealing with injuries, all that kind of stuff. And I docked him in my evaluation for that because I just hadn't seen him play good football for 2 years. So I don't trust that guy. But it's really easy to see Penix and say, oh man, you see that game yesterday, you see that game earlier this season where he played really well. And I for me, again, I like to think, especially with quarterbacks, that the more information you have, the more you can kind of figure it out. So I like to see a developmental kind of crescendo from that position. There's other positions it's not as important for me, like defensive line, for example. Like if you're an edge rusher and 1 year you had 15 sacks, for example, in college, I know that's in there. And I know it's just about making sure you're in the right environment to kind of maximize that. So it's not because it's more athletic based, that position. For the quarterback, I want to see them, again, see more coverages, do more things, and kind of get those growing pains out in college if possible, as opposed to kind of drafting a young player who's not all the way there and then kind of expect them to grow under my tutelage. Because then there's 3 years maybe, like Justin Fields is a perfect example, young player coming out, 2 or 3 years of development. His rookie contract's almost up. You got to pay him. And that's the conversation they're having now about Caleb Williams, not necessarily from a straight talent perspective, but we can make sure this dude's under contract for another 5 years while we're building our program. So
yeah, for sure. It's worth pointing out. And by the way, I agree with you, just presenting all of the information, if you will. Caleb Williams, 22, just turned 22 back in November. So he's definitely on the younger side of it. Meanwhile, Sam Howell is only 23. He turned 23 in September. So we do talk about Sam's development. That is, I think, something that's worth keeping in mind for him. Like, he still has upward trajectory to go, it would seem, based off his age. As for how he's actually going on that trajectory, well, that's for tomorrow. We'll see you then. Tape breakdown, Sam Howell in focus on the Take Command podcast. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.